In my last video, I showed you what happens when you get the exposure right. And in this video, I'm gonna show you what happens when you don't. I underexposed this shot pretty badly. Falling light, ND filters, and just reciprocity failure math gone wrong. I just got it wrong. The negative, it's thin, it's flat, there's no detail in the shadows pretty much at all. But I still kind of wanted the image. The movement in the sky, the structure, it just kind of still had something when I was looking at it. And I'm not saying you should aim to screw up an exposure like I did here or mess up your negatives, but struggling through prints like this can actually teach you something important in the darkroom. So in this video, I'm gonna show you exactly how I made what I feel is a good darkroom print out of a terrible negative. What filters I used, how I split the contrast, what I dodged, what I burned, and ultimately what I learned trying to save it. Because we obviously all screw up sometimes, and creating images is no exception, the real question is, can you still make a print worth keeping? So if you've shot black and white film for any length of time, I'm sure you've probably ended up with a thin or underexposed negative at one time or another. You hold it up to the light and there's just barely anything there. It looks really weak, transparent, and you already know that it's gonna be really tough to print if you can even print it at all. Trying to print a negative in the darkroom like this, you'll usually end up with dull, muddy shadows. The blacks never really get deep enough, and if they do, the contrast just gets overwhelming. Or there's no real contrast at all, no separation, and it's just a low energy, lifeless image. And the usual fixes don't really help. If you dial up the contrast, now you just block up all the shadows and blow out the highlights. And if you try to dodge up the shadows, they tend to just fade into this nasty mush. So what's happening is actually pretty simple, but it's nonetheless frustrating. Your shadow detail is landing on the toe of the film curve. That's the part of the negative where the tonal separation is minimal. Everything is compressed and there's not a lot of contrast. So now you're kind of stuck. If you print it straight, it's just flat and blah. And if you increase the contrast, you're kind of blowing out and blocking up everything. But here's the good news. There is a way to pull something beautiful out of a negative like this. It just takes a different approach, and that's exactly what I'm gonna show you in this video. And if you wanna get better at building that kind of darkroom intuition, just knowing how to handle tough negatives, how to get consistent contrast, that's exactly what I teach inside of Unlock the Darkroom. It's a full step-by-step system for making black and white prints that you're actually proud of. And this is for whether you're brand new to the darkroom or returning after years away. So you can check it out anytime. The link is in the description. Now let me show you exactly how I tackled this print. So here's the actual negative I was working with. At first glance, it's just clearly thin. It doesn't look that good, especially in the bottom half of the frame. But there were a few things that I did like. The sun was still hitting the upper trees and the lighthouse nicely. That gave the top section of the frame actually some solid density. It had bright whites on the actual lighthouse building itself. It had some decent tones in the sky, and the wispy clouds kind of streaking across from that long exposure I gave it. It added a little bit of drama that I liked, but I was definitely gonna have to fight for it. So the real challenge was everything kind of below in the lower half of the negative. The trees in the midsection of the frame had basically nothing there. There was no density. So I needed to be okay with those kind of going to black. So then I was looking at these foreground rocks, and I really needed those to provide some weight and balance to the image. But they were sitting squarely on the toe of the film curve where it's just very low contrast and there's not a lot of separation there. And I feel like if I let everything fall to black, the entire bottom of the image would just really kind of be dull and empty, and I didn't want that. So to make the image work, I decided I needed to anchor the shadows with just solid blacks, like intentional blacks. But I also had to dodge up and increase the contrast in the foreground rocks. This would give them visual weight and create a path kind of into the print. And that became the core challenge, how to give depth and interest to a part of the negative that barely existed really, and still keep the highlights and sky intact. And that's what led me to the strategy that I'm about to show you. How I use split contrast, selective burning, and a little local bleaching to bring a bad negative back to life on paper. So right away, I knew a straight print just wasn't going to work for this one, But blasting the whole thing with a high contrast filter isn't gonna work either. That's just gonna block up the shadows and or blow out the highlights. Specifically, that would be hard on the sky and the lighthouse, just having too much contrast there. And on the opposite side of it, the foreground didn't have enough contrast or tonal separation. So to make the print, I used a multi-filter approach. I started with a full frame exposure using a number 3 filter. And you can see from the proof, it does give an okay image. The lighthouse looks good, the sky looks okay, but the foreground is still kind of really low contrast and muddy and not where I want it to be. So the next step was to actually dodge the foreground rocks during that grade 3 exposure, lightening them up so I could actually intentionally burn them back with more contrast. That gave just enough to hold some interest in the foreground and balance out the image a little bit. I also burned down the sky using both the number 3 and the 5 filter, which brought out the clouds and helped give the top of the image some depth. And then after locking in the exposure and contrast, I did just a little bit of selective bleaching on a few of the foreground rocks. And I wanted to just make them pop a little bit more to kind of draw your attention to those and into the image, into the foreground. So here's the final print log, noting every single filter, dodge, burn, and timing, even the toning that I used. And I created this so I could reference it later and repeat the print when needed. I'm huge on not having to reinvent the wheel, so when I learn something, I want to be able to look at it and go back to it. So I knew right off the bat, this was just never gonna be an easy print to make. The negative definitely had or has problems, but there were also things that I really liked, specifically the light on the lighthouse and how that looked, and some of the light hitting the trees, the movement in the clouds, and the feeling just of that place at the exact moment. Because the light was going down, so it felt like a moodier type of image even when I was taking it. So getting a final print that worked for me, it really meant making a lot of small decisions. Not just about contrast, but more about balance. Where to hold back, where to burn down, where to increase contrast, where to leave it alone. It was more about finding a path through what problems that negative had and still end up with something that felt finished and intentional to me. And honestly, that's really the kind of printing that teaches you the most. So it's totally one thing to print from a perfect negative or something that's easy to print, but when you're dealing with a tough negative and you're still able to come away with something that you're proud of, you just walk away with a whole new level of confidence and understanding for your system and your darkroom. And if you want to build a darkroom workflow that actually helps you make decisions like this, one that gives you a repeatable system for getting clean, consistent prints no matter what you're working with, that's exactly what you'll learn inside of Unlock the Darkroom. It's my complete training on black and white printing, from how you expose and process your film to how you proof and build up the final print, step by step in a proven system. I spent well over a year designing this specifically to save you years of trial and error. So the link's right below, go check it out. We'd love to see you in there. And if you like this video, I think you're gonna love the next one right here.